Title: Reflections in Blood. Chapter 1: The Crime. The town of Willow Creek owed much of its charm and its survival to Gerald Langley. A tall, silver-haired man with an air of quiet authority, Langley had been both revered and envied in equal measure. His story was one of transformation, not just for himself but for the town he had called home. Born into a family of modest means, Langley grew up in the shadow of the once booming Willow Creek textile mill, which had been the lifeblood of the town during the Industrial Revolution. The mill provided jobs for hundreds, and its closure in the 1950s plunged the community into economic despair. Businesses shuttered, families left in search of work, and the once vibrant town began to crumble. Young Gerald watched his parents struggle, his father taking on menial labor, his mother stretching every penny, and vowed that one day he would bring prosperity back to Willow Creek. Langley's chance came in the 1970s when he earned a scholarship to study business at the University of Cambridge. Armed with ambition and a sharp mind, he excelled academically and built a network of powerful connections. By the time he returned to Willow Creek in the late 1980s, he was a self-made millionaire with a reputation for savvy investments in real estate and hospitality. But Gerald's return wasn't merely a homecoming. He saw an opportunity to breathe new life into the struggling town. Over the next 2 decades, Langley poured his wealth into projects designed to revitalize Willow Creek. He bought the abandoned textile mill and converted it into a luxury boutique hotel, complete with a restaurant that became a destination for foodies across the region. He restored Ashcroft Manor, once the home of a wealthy industrialist, turning it into a community center that hosted everything from art exhibitions to charity galas. He even funded the renovation of the town square, replacing cracked pavements and installing an ornate fountain at its center. The results were transformative. Tourists flocked to Willow Creek to experience its quaint charm, filling the newly opened bed and breakfasts and cafes that sprung up along the cobblestone streets. Local businesses thrived, and the town's once dwindling population began to stabilize. Langley became a beloved figure, his name synonymous with the town's resurgence. But Gerald Langley was not without his detractors. Beneath the veneer of generosity lay whispers of manipulation. Some accused him of wielding too much influence over the town council, steering decisions to benefit his own ventures. Others claimed his charitable acts were more about building his legacy than genuine altruism. And then there were the rumors of betrayals. Business partners who had been pushed aside, landowners pressured to sell, and employees who spoke of his ruthlessness in private. Still, these criticisms were muted in the face of Langley's tangible contributions. At public events, he was the picture of grace and humility, his deep voice resonating with sincerity as he spoke of community and shared success. To the townspeople, he was their benefactor, the man who had given them back their pride and prosperity. On the night of his murder, Gerald Langley was alone in the Ashcroft Manor Library, preparing for the upcoming Willow Creek Heritage Festival. The festival was his brainchild, an annual event celebrating the town's history and attracting hundreds of visitors. Papers and books were spread across the desk, a glass of aged scotch within arm's reach. The fireplace crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across the room's ornate bookshelves. No one knew the exact time of the attack, but by the time Lillian Carter returned to the manor, it was too late. The philanthropist, who had done so much for Willow Creek, lay lifeless on the polished oak floor. His head bore a jagged wound, blood pooling around him in an uneven circle. The fire's glow illuminated the murder weapon, a wrought iron poker, its tip bent slightly, abandoned just feet from the body. Detective Rachel Monroe, surveying the scene, couldn't help but reflect on the complexity of the man whose life had just been stolen. "Langley," she murmured to herself, her voice barely audible above the rain tapping against the windows. "The man who saved this town and made a few enemies along the way." The room told a story of violence. A chair lay overturned near the desk, and the scuff marks on the floor suggested a struggle. Rachel's eyes lingered on the poker, its darkened surface glinting in the firelight. Beside it, a journal sat open on the desk, its last entry hastily scrawled, "Must deal with Jason once and for all." Rachel straightened and turned to Officer Miles, who had been silently cataloging the scene. "Who found him?" "His assistant, Lillian Carter," Miles replied, gesturing toward the hallway. Lillian sat in the corridor, clutching a cup of tea as if it were the only thing grounding her. Her pale face and trembling hands spoke of the horror she had witnessed. Rachel knelt beside her. "Lillian, I know this is hard, but I need you to tell me everything you remember." Lillian's voice was barely above a whisper. I was leaving for the night and realized I'd forgotten my notebook. When I came back, I found him like this." Her sobs filled the hallway, but Rachel's attention remained on the details. The poker, the journal, and the cryptic reference to Jason would become the first puzzle pieces in a case that would unravel not only a murder, but the darkest secrets of Willow Creek. Chapter 2. Adam Carter. Adam Carter's life was defined by quiet resilience and an unshakable commitment to making the most of his opportunities. Adopted as a baby, Adam grew up in a modest yet loving home in Willow Creek. His adoptive parents, Margaret and Henry Carter, had been unable to have children of their own and had welcomed Adam into their lives with open arms. Margaret, a former librarian, instilled in him a love for books and history, often reading to him from a worn collection of classics. Henry, a carpenter by trade, taught Adam the value of hard work and integrity. Their encouragement and unwavering support helped Adam thrive, even as he occasionally grappled with the questions that inevitably came with being adopted. Who were his biological parents? Why had they given him up? Though these thoughts lingered, they never overshadowed his gratitude for the life he had been given. A journey through adulthood. Adam excelled in school, his curious mind and natural empathy making him a favorite among teachers and peers. After graduating, he attended a nearby university, studying education with a focus on history, a subject he adored. He found solace in the stories of the past, tales of triumph and tragedy that seemed to echo his own questions about identity and purpose. Returning to Willow Creek after earning his degree, Adam accepted a teaching position at Willow Creek Primary School. Over the years, he became a pillar of the community. His classrooms were known for their creativity, with historical reenactments and storytelling sessions that brought history to life. Adam's students adored him, and parents praised his dedication. Outside the classroom, Adam lived a quiet life, his routines predictable but fulfilling. He spent his evenings reading or tending to the small garden behind his cozy cottage. But Adam's life would take a dramatic turn, shattering the peaceful existence he had built. The investigation detective Rachel Monroe had spent the night combing through the crime scene at Ashcroft Manor. The journal entry referencing Jason was a critical clue, but the evidence that stood out most was the security footage retrieved from the library. Though the angle was partial and the lighting poor, the footage clearly showed a man leaving the scene shortly after the estimated time of Langley's death. The figure bore an uncanny resemblance to Adam Carter. Further evidence seemed to seal Adam's fate. The poker used in the murder bore fingerprints that matched his. Additionally, a witness, a local delivery driver, claimed to have seen a man fitting Adam's description walking near the manor around the time of the murder. While the evidence was circumstantial, it was enough to warrant suspicion. Detective Monroe felt a nagging unease. She had lived in Willow Creek long enough to know of Adam Carter's reputation, a gentle, well-liked man with no known enemies or violent tendencies. But the facts demanded action. Monroe and her team headed to Willow Creek Primary School the next morning to bring Adam in for questioning. The arrest. It was just past 9 a.m. when Adam was teaching a lesson about the Industrial Revolution to his Year 6 class. The children sat captivated as Adam described the impact of machinery on daily life, his voice animated, his passion evident. The classroom door opened, and the school secretary stepped in, her face pale. "Mr. Carter," she said quietly, "there are some officers here to see you." Adam's brow furrowed in confusion as he excused himself and walked to the hallway. Detective Monroe and two uniformed officers stood waiting. Monroe stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "Adam Carter?" she asked. "Yes. Is something wrong?" Adam replied, his concern genuine. "Mr. Carter, we're investigating the murder of Gerald Langley, and we need you to come with us for questioning." Adam froze, his mind racing. "Murder? Gerald Langley? I don't understand. I barely knew him." Monroe's tone remained professional but firm. "We have evidence that places you at the scene. I'm afraid we'll need to take you into custody." The weight of her words left Adam stunned. His thoughts blurred as the officers moved to place him in handcuffs. Whispers spread among the staff and students who had gathered in the hallway, their eyes wide with shock. The children, who had always seen Adam as a source of kindness and stability, looked on in confusion and fear, processing the accusation. At the station, Adam sat in the stark interrogation room, his hands trembling. He repeated the same words over and over. "I didn't do it. I've never hurt anyone." But the evidence spoke louder than his pleas. His fingerprints on the murder weapon, the eyewitness testimony, and the damning footage made his protestations seem hollow. As the hours passed, Adam's thoughts turned to his adoptive parents. What would they think? How could he explain this to them, or to the community that had trusted him for so long? Adam's mind spiraled as he grappled with the impossibility of his situation. He hadn't been near Ashcroft Manor that night. He had spent the evening grading papers and preparing the next day's lesson. But with no one to corroborate his alibi, he felt like a man trapped in a nightmare. Unbeknownst to Adam, the truth was far more complex than he could imagine. The fingerprints, the footage, and even the eyewitness report were all accurate, but they were tied to someone he didn't know existed. Someone who shared his face, someone who had lived a life utterly different from his own, someone who would soon turn his world upside down. Chapter 3. Jason Rivers. Jason Rivers' life was a testament to the devastating effects of neglect and circumstance. While his twin Adam was embraced by a loving family in Willow Creek, Jason was thrust into a chaotic and unrelenting cycle of instability. Separated at birth due to a tragic car accident that claimed their biological parents, the twins were sent into the foster care system. Adam was adopted within months, but Jason's fate took a darker turn. A childhood of shadows. Jason's early years were spent in overcrowded foster homes, where resources were scarce and compassion even scarcer. He quickly learned that in order to survive, he had to fend for himself. When he was 5, his first foster parents were kind but overwhelmed, taking in more children than they could manage. Jason often felt invisible, a shadow among many, his cries for attention drowned out by the noise of a crowded household. At 7, he was moved to another home, where things became worse. His foster father was a cruel man who believed discipline was best delivered with harsh words and sometimes a heavy hand. The emotional scars Jason carried from this time never truly healed. By the time he was 10, he had been in and out of 3 different homes, each one stripping away a piece of his hope and trust in people. School was no refuge for Jason. Labeled a troublemaker, he was the kid who never had a packed lunch, wore secondhand clothes that didn't fit, and stared out the classroom window, dreaming of escape. Teachers tried to reach him, but their efforts felt superficial to Jason, who saw their pity as a reminder of how broken his life was. Teenage rebellion. Jason's teenage years were marked by rebellion. At 13, he was caught shoplifting for the first time, a desperate attempt to fit in with a group of boys who thrived on petty crime. They called themselves the Misfits and spent their days loitering in alleyways, smoking stolen cigarettes, and planning their next escapades. For Jason, their camaraderie was intoxicating, a substitute for the family he never had. By 15, his crimes escalated from shoplifting to breaking and entering. Each theft was a rush, a momentary reprieve from the gnawing emptiness he felt inside. He dropped out of school at 16, convinced that education held no future for someone like him. Instead, he began working odd jobs, often under the table, to fund his increasingly reckless lifestyle. Discovering the truth. At 18, Jason stumbled upon a revelation that changed everything. While rummaging through the belongings of one of his foster parents, he found a file containing details about his biological parents. It included a birth certificate with a shocking detail. Twin brother, Adam Carter. Jason stared at the paper for hours, disbelief giving way to a simmering anger. Adam had been given everything, a loving home, stability, while Jason was left to fend for himself. A life of crime. The years that followed saw Jason spiral further into crime. His hatred for Adam became a fuel, driving him to make choices that pushed him further into the shadows of society. By his early 20s, He had developed a reputation in the underworld for being both resourceful and ruthless. He ran with gangs, forged alliances with dangerous individuals, and earned a living through illegal means: burglary, fraud, and even extortion. Despite his tough exterior, Jason harbored a deep-seated insecurity. Every now and then, he would come across people who reminded him of what he could have been: men and women with families, careers, and lives filled with meaning. These moments only deepened his resentment, causing him to lash out at the world even harder. Connections to Gerald Langley. Jason's path crossed with Gerald Langley's during one of his many schemes. Langley, despite his public persona as Willow Creek's benefactor, had a history of shady dealings. Jason had approached Langley with a proposition: access to valuable antiques acquired through less than legal means. At first, Langley entertained Jason's offer, seeing it as an opportunity to add rare items to his collection at a fraction of their worth. But when Jason tried to demand more money than originally agreed, Langley cut him off, threatening to expose him to the authorities. Jason didn't take the rejection lightly. He felt Langley had treated him like trash, another powerful figure looking down on him. Over the years, Jason's anger toward Langley festered, merging with his resentment toward Adam into a toxic brew of hatred. The breaking point. In the weeks leading up to Langley's murder, Jason's life had taken a sharp downturn. A failed heist had left him desperate for cash, and his criminal connections were beginning to lose patience. When he heard about the Willow Creek Heritage Festival and the valuable antiques that would be on display at Ashcroft Manor, he saw an opportunity to strike. Jason planned to break into the manor under the guise of a robbery. He wasn't initially planning to kill Langley, but when he was confronted in the library, years of anger and frustration erupted. The poker from the fireplace became a weapon in the heat of the moment. Jason struck Langley, leaving him lifeless on the floor. As he fled the scene, Jason thought he had covered his tracks. He didn't know about the security camera that captured his face, or more accurately, his brother's face. A life defined by resentment. Jason Rivers was a product of his environment, shaped by neglect, abuse, and a lifetime of feeling unwanted. Though his crimes were his own, the circumstances that forged him painted a picture of a man who could have been different under other circumstances. Jason's hatred for the world and for the brother he had never met drove him to become the person he was, a man lost to bitterness and desperation. The murder of Gerald Langley would be the beginning of Jason's reckoning. But for Adam, it was the start of a nightmare he could never have imagined. Chapter 4. Sophia Bennett. Sophia Bennett's career as a criminal defense lawyer had always been guided by her unwavering belief in justice and compassion for the underdog. Growing up in a modest home in Manchester, Sophia had witnessed her single mother, Rachel, struggle to make ends meet while raising her and her two younger siblings. Rachel worked long hours as a nurse, often coming home exhausted, but never too tired to encourage her children to dream big and do right by others. Sophia had inherited her mother's sense of justice. She remembered the countless times Rachel had spoken about the patients she fought for, those overlooked or dismissed by a system that valued efficiency over humanity. That same fire drove Sophia to pursue law, specializing in criminal defense to help those who couldn't help themselves. She believed that everyone deserved a fair trial, no matter their circumstances. Compassion in action. Sophia's reputation as a compassionate and meticulous lawyer had been built over years of dedication. Her first major case involved defending a young man falsely accused of armed robbery. The prosecution's case had seemed airtight, but Sophia's careful review of the evidence revealed glaring inconsistencies. A grainy CCTV image had been used to convict her client in the court of public opinion, but Sophia's insistence on cross-referencing timestamps with traffic camera footage proved her client couldn't have been at the scene. He was acquitted, and Sophia gained a reputation for leaving no stone unturned. But it wasn't just her skills in the courtroom that made her stand out. Sophia often went above and beyond for her clients, understanding their lives and the circumstances that led them to her door. She volunteered at local legal aid clinics, mentoring young law students, and offering free consultations to those who couldn't afford legal representation. For Sophia, every case was personal. The call for Adam Carter, When Adam Carter's case landed on her desk, Sophia was intrigued. The details were compelling. A well-respected schoolteacher accused of murdering one of the most influential men in Willow Creek. The evidence seemed overwhelming, but something about the case didn't sit right with her. Perhaps it was Adam's reputation, a man beloved by his students and community, or the way he vehemently protested his innocence, not with desperation, but with genuine disbelief. Sophia met Adam for the first time in a cramped interview room at the police station. His hands were clasped tightly on the table, his face pale but calm. "I didn't do this," he said, his voice steady but tinged with sadness. "I don't even know how they think I could." Sophia believed him. It wasn't just his words, but the way he said them. Over the years, she had developed a knack for reading people, and Adam's sincerity was undeniable. Finding the inconsistencies. As Sophia began reviewing the case, her doubts about Adam's guilt grew. The evidence seemed too perfect, too neatly aligned. The fingerprints on the fireplace poker, the grainy security footage, and the witness testimony all pointed to Adam, but only on the surface. Sophia's instincts told her something was off. The fingerprints on the poker, too perfect for a struggle, were her first clue. A forensic expert confirmed her suspicion. They didn't align with a violent altercation. The report stated the prints were remarkably clean and intact, something she found odd for a weapon used in a violent struggle. She consulted a forensic expert who confirmed her suspicion. Fingerprints on a rough, frequently handled surface, like a poker, should show signs of smudging or distortion, especially in the heat of an altercation. Next, she turned her attention to the security footage. Sophia scrutinized every frame of the grainy video. While the figure leaving Ashcroft Manor bore an uncanny resemblance to Adam, there were subtle discrepancies. The man's gait seemed slightly different, more hurried, almost erratic. Sophia obtained footage of Adam walking to and from school and compared it side by side with the footage from the crime scene. The differences, though subtle, were undeniable to a trained eye. Finally, the witness testimony caught her attention. The delivery driver claimed to have seen Adam near Ashcroft Manor at the time of the murder, but his statement was vague. When pressed for details, he admitted he had only seen the man from a distance, in the dim glow of a street lamp. Sophia knew eyewitness accounts were notoriously unreliable, especially under poor lighting conditions. She tracked down the driver and asked him to describe the man again. His description was inconsistent with Adam's features, suggesting he may have seen someone else entirely. A gut feeling, Sophia's growing doubts solidified into conviction. When she stumbled upon a key detail in Adam's adoption records late one night, her eyes bleary from hours of searching. A single note, twin brother, Jason Rivers, leapt off the page. Her breath caught as she cross-referenced Jason's name with police databases, uncovering a trail of criminal activity that painted a chilling picture. A new theory. The discovery of Adam's twin opened a floodgate of questions. Where was this twin now? Could he have been the man captured on the security footage? The idea seemed far-fetched, but Sophia couldn't ignore the possibility. She began combing through adoption agency records, piecing together fragments of information until she uncovered a name: Jason Rivers. Jason's criminal history was extensive, and his last known address placed him less than an hour from Willow Creek. Sophia felt a chill as she read through his file. Here was a man who matched Adam's description almost perfectly, a man with the motive and the means to frame his brother for a crime he didn't commit. A relentless pursuit. Sophia's compassion had always been her driving force, but now it was fueled by determination. Adam's life was at stake, and she refused to let him be convicted for a crime he didn't commit. Armed with her findings, she returned to Detective Rachel Monroe with her theory, hoping to convince the police to reopen their investigation. But convincing the authorities wouldn't be easy. The evidence against Adam was compelling, and the idea of a twin brother committing the crime seemed more like the plot of a crime novel than reality. Still, Sophia knew she had to try. For Adam, for justice, and for the truth. Chapter 5. The Confrontation. Sophia Bennett stood at the threshold of the derelict cabin, her heart pounding as she gripped her phone tightly, its recording app silently running. The air smelled of damp wood and decay, and the faint creak of floorboards under her feet echoed through the eerie stillness. Jason Rivers was inside, his presence a storm waiting to break. This was no ordinary conversation. Sophia wasn't just here to find answers, she was stepping into the lion's den. Jason's lair. The cabin, nestled in a secluded stretch of woodland, was a monument to Jason's chaotic life. The walls were plastered with yellowed newspaper clippings, some detailing crimes eerily similar to Gerald Langley's murder. A rusted kettle whistled faintly on an old gas burner, adding an unsettling normalcy to the otherwise sinister space. Jason sat slouched in a battered armchair, his wiry frame taut with unease. He didn't look like a man who had everything under control. He looked like a predator cornered, desperate to protect his secrets. His eyes, sharp, restless, and filled with distrust, tracked Sophia as she entered. "I don't recall inviting company," Jason sneered, his voice low and gravelly. He didn't stand, but his hands gripped the arms of the chair, his knuckles whitening. "I didn't come for tea," Sophia replied, forcing her voice to remain steady despite the adrenaline rushing through her veins. She took a calculated step forward, her heels clicking on the wooden floor. "I came for the truth," Jason chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "Truth, lady? You're in the wrong place for that. People like me don't deal in truths, we deal in survival." Sophia's jaw tightened, but she didn't falter. "Adam Carter, does the name mean anything to you?" Jason's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, and Sophia caught it, a tell. She pressed on. "I know who you are, Jason. I know about the adoption, about the separation. I know you're his twin." Jason leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Twin, huh? Big word for someone who doesn't know what the hell they're talking about." Sophia stood her ground. "You framed Adam for Gerald Langley's murder. The security footage, the fingerprints, the witness, all planted by you. And I'm guessing Langley wasn't just a random target. What was it? A bad deal? Revenge?" Jason's jaw clenched, the vein in his temple pulsing. For a moment he said nothing, the silence thick with tension. Then he stood, his movements slow, deliberate, like a predator sizing up its prey. "You've got a big mouth, lady," he growled, stepping closer. "But here's the thing, you don't know me. You don't know what I've been through, what I've done to survive. So maybe you should keep your theories to yourself before you get hurt." Sophia's pulse quickened, but she refused to back down. "You think I'm afraid of you, Jason? I've dealt with men like you before. Men who think their pain justifies their actions. But here's the truth. You're not the victim here. You're the monster." The breaking point, Jason snapped. In an instant, he closed the distance between them, his face inches from Sophia's. His breath smelled of stale cigarettes and rage, and his voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "You think you've got it all figured out, huh? Little Miss Perfect lawyer coming to save the day. But you don't know anything. You don't know what it's like to grow up invisible, watching everyone else get the life you'll never have." Sophia refused to flinch. She met his glare head-on, her voice calm but steely. "You're right, Jason. I don't know what you've been through, but framing your brother for murder? That's not survival. That's cowardice." Jason's eyes flickered with a mix of fury and something else, doubt. It was a fleeting moment, but Sophia saw it, and it gave her the opening she needed. "Langley didn't care about you, did he?" she pressed, her voice softening just enough to disarm him. "You thought you could scare him, maybe get some money, but he didn't take you seriously. And when he threatened to expose you, you snapped. Isn't that right?" Jason's fists tightened, his chest heaving. "Shut up," he spat, but his voice wavered. "You left a trail, Jason," Sophia continued, her confidence building. "The fingerprints, the footage, it all points to Adam, but it's too perfect. And now I have you here, on record. Every word you say is another nail in your coffin." Jason's face twisted with rage. He grabbed a nearby chair and hurled it across the room, the crash echoing like a gunshot. "You think you're so smart," he shouted. "You don't know what it's like to be me. You and Adam, you've had it easy your whole lives. I've had to fight for every scrap, every damn breath." Sophia didn't flinch, even as her heart raced. "And this is how you justify it? By destroying the one person who never even knew you existed?" The climax, Jason paced the room like a caged animal, his movements erratic. His voice, though venomous, wavered with something Sophia hadn't expected: doubt. "He doesn't deserve it," he muttered almost to himself. "He doesn't deserve the life he got." For a fleeting moment his mask slipped, revealing a man burdened by the weight of his own bitterness. But the vulnerability vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a defensive snarl. Sophia took a cautious step closer. "It's not about what he deserves, Jason. It's about what's right. And right now you have a choice. You can keep running, keep letting your anger control you, or you can do the one thing that might actually make a difference: tell the truth." Jason stopped pacing, his shoulders slumping slightly. For a moment, he looked like a man who was utterly defeated. But then his expression hardened, his eyes narrowing. "Get out," he said, his voice low and venomous. "Before I do something I can't take back." Sophia held her ground for a moment, then slowly backed toward the door. "This isn't over, Jason. You know that, don't you?" Jason didn't respond, his back turned to her as he stared at the wall, his fists clenched. Sophia slipped out of the cabin, her heart pounding as she stepped into the cool night air. She had what she needed: the confrontation on record, Jason's admission of guilt in his words and actions. Now, it was only a matter of time before justice caught up with him. As she walked back to her car, she couldn't help but feel a pang of pity for Jason. He wasn't just a criminal. He was a broken man, consumed by bitterness and pain. But compassion couldn't overshadow the truth. Jason Rivers was dangerous, and he had to be stopped. Chapter 6. The Truth Revealed. Sophia Bennett's confrontation with Jason Rivers was the catalyst the police needed to reopen their investigation. Her recording of Jason's volatile outburst and implicit admissions gave Detective Rachel Monroe enough justification to dig deeper into Jason's connection to the crime. It was the turning point in what had seemed like an airtight case against Adam Carter. However, unraveling the truth was far from simple. The identical twin connection, unknown to law enforcement during the initial investigation, presented a scientific and legal challenge that tested the team's expertise and resolve. Identical DNA, a misleading trail. When the murder weapon, the fireplace poker, was recovered from the crime scene, the forensic team found fingerprints that matched Adam's, or so it seemed. It wasn't until Sophia uncovered the existence of Jason Rivers that the team realized they might be dealing with identical twins, a complication that explained why the fingerprints and DNA both appeared to incriminate Adam. "It's the fingerprints," Detective Monroe said, placing a report on the desk in front of Sophia. "At first glance, they matched Adam's perfectly, but when we compared them with Jason's, the anomalies stood out: old scars on 2 fingers, likely from an injury years ago." Sophia leaned in, her heart pounding. "That's it," she murmured. "That's what clears Adam." "Fingerprint forensics," Monroe explained. "Twins share DNA, but environmental factors leave subtle marks on fingerprints. Jason's scars from a bar fight matched perfectly with the impressions left on the poker. Jason's criminal history provided further evidence. In his late 20s, he had been involved in a bar fight that left him with deep lacerations on his right hand, permanently altering the patterns of 2 fingers. This discovery provided the first solid forensic link pointing directly to Jason and exonerating Adam. The witness revisited. Sophia's doubts about the delivery driver's testimony prompted a deeper investigation into his statement. The police initially relied on his vague description of a man near Ashcroft Manor around the time of the murder. When shown photographs of Adam and Jason side by side, the witness hesitated before pointing to Jason as the man he'd seen. The breakthrough came when the witness mentioned something seemingly insignificant. The man had been smoking. Adam was known for his clean lifestyle, including his disdain for smoking, while Jason had a well-documented habit. Cigarette butts found near the scene were re-examined and found to match Jason's DNA. The disguised alibi further. Digging uncovered evidence that Jason had gone to great lengths to set Adam up. The security footage showing a man leaving Ashcroft Manor bore striking similarities to Adam's appearance, but Sophia's earlier analysis of the figure's gait revealed subtle differences. Jason, aware of their physical likeness, had deliberately styled himself to resemble Adam on the night of the crime. Witnesses from a nearby gas station confirmed seeing a man matching Jason's description hours before the murder, purchasing a jacket and hat similar to those Adam often wore. This meticulous planning revealed Jason's calculated intent to frame his brother, rather than an impulsive crime of passion. Jason's digital footprint. The most damning evidence came from Jason's phone. After obtaining a warrant, investigators uncovered a series of texts and emails that detailed his growing animosity toward Langley. One message to an associate read, "The old man's got it coming. After what he did, he deserves everything he gets." Additionally, location data from Jason's phone placed him near Ashcroft Manor on the night of the murder, further contradicting his earlier claims of being nowhere near Willow Creek. The weapon's hidden clue. Finally, the fireplace poker provided one last piece of evidence. Beneath the layers of blood and smudged fingerprints, forensic analysts discovered a faint residue of oil consistent with the type found in Jason's mechanic work. While this could have been dismissed as circumstantial, it provided another critical connection to Jason's lifestyle and habits, further solidifying his link to the murder. The case against Jason. By the time the new evidence was compiled, the case against Jason Rivers was overwhelming. Detective Monroe called a meeting to discuss the findings, her usual stoic demeanor giving way to a rare expression of satisfaction. "We've got him," she said simply. "Between the fingerprint anomalies, the cigarette butts, the phone data, and his own words, there's no doubt anymore. Jason Rivers killed Gerald Langley, and he framed his brother to cover his tracks. A reckoning." Jason was arrested at the derelict cabin days after Sophia's confrontation. He didn't go quietly. When officers arrived, he attempted to flee, leading to a tense chase through the surrounding woods. He was eventually subdued and taken into custody. During questioning, Jason oscillated between defiance and silence, but the weight of the evidence left him with little room to maneuver. In the end, he refused to confess outright, but his actions had already condemned him. For Adam Carter, the revelation of the truth was a bittersweet relief. He was exonerated, his name cleared, but the experience had left scars that would take time to heal. The knowledge that his twin had harbored such hatred toward him was a burden he would carry for the rest of his life. For Jason, the confrontation marked the beginning of a long journey through the justice system, and perhaps, in his darkest moments, a reckoning with himself. Chapter 7. Aftermath. Adam Carter sat alone in his small cottage, the warm glow of the evening sun filtering through the curtains. The trial was over, his innocence proven, and Jason Rivers, the brother he never knew, was now behind bars. Yet the relief Adam had anticipated didn't come. Instead, he felt an oppressive weight in his chest, a deep and gnawing emptiness that no legal vindication could erase. The past weeks had unraveled his quiet, predictable life. The man he thought he was, a devoted teacher, a valued member of Willow Creek, and a respected mentor to countless students, felt like a stranger. Everything he believed about himself had been shaken, leaving him adrift in unfamiliar waters. The turmoil Adam struggled to reconcile, the revelations about Jason. How could two people, born from the same parents, lead such drastically different lives? He wondered what his life might have been like if their circumstances had been reversed. If Jason had been adopted by the Carters, would he have become the gentle teacher, and Adam the embittered criminal? These thoughts consumed Adam, haunting him during the quiet moments of his day. At night, he often woke from dreams in which Jason's face, so much like his own, stared back at him, accusing, mocking, or pleading for something Adam couldn't name. The people of Willow Creek, though supportive, couldn't truly understand what Adam was going through. They expressed relief and joy at his exoneration, treating him like a hero for surviving the ordeal. But their sympathy often came with an undercurrent of pity, and Adam couldn't bear the whispers, the lingering stares, or the well-meaning questions about his brother. He returned to teaching briefly, hoping the routine would anchor him, but even that felt wrong. The children, once a source of joy, now reminded him of his own lost innocence, and Jason's. He couldn't focus, and his lessons felt hollow. It became clear to Adam that staying in Willow Creek, surrounded by the reminders of what had happened, was an impossible task, a new path. After weeks of soul-searching, Adam made the decision to leave Willow Creek. The thought of abandoning the only home he'd ever known filled him with sadness, but he knew he couldn't heal in a place so tied to his pain. He packed his belongings, keeping only what was essential, and said quiet goodbyes to the few who mattered most. Margaret and Henry Carter, his adoptive parents, were heartbroken but supportive. "You've always followed your heart, Adam," Margaret said, holding his hand tightly. and wherever it leads you, we know you'll make a difference. He didn't know where he was going, only that he needed to find meaning again. He needed to do something that felt worthwhile, something that could turn the darkness of his recent experiences into a source of light for others. Inspiration from the past. In the months after his departure, Adam found himself drawn to stories of redemption. He read books and watched documentaries about people who had turned their lives around after prison, their journeys often beginning with someone who believed in them when no one else would. It struck a chord deep within him. Jason's face came to his mind again, and for once it wasn't accompanied by anger or fear. Instead, Adam felt sorrow, a profound sadness for the brother who had been lost to a system that failed him. He couldn't save Jason, but perhaps he could prevent others from falling through the same cracks. A new career. Adam decided to pursue a career in social work, specializing in programs that helped former inmates assimilate back into society. He returned to university, earning a degree in criminology and rehabilitation counseling. The work was challenging, often frustrating, but it gave Adam a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. He became a part of a nonprofit organization dedicated to reducing recidivism by providing ex-offenders with education, job training, and mental health support. Adam's role involved one-on-one counseling, helping individuals confront the choices that had led them to prison and guiding them toward a more hopeful future. His own story became a tool, a way to connect with the people he worked with. Adam never shared the details of his ordeal with Jason, but he spoke openly about the importance of second chances and the power of transformation. "We're not defined by our worst moments," he often told his clients. "It's what we do afterward that matters." Healing through purpose. Over time, Adam found a sense of peace. The work didn't erase the scars left by his experiences, but it gave them meaning. He began to see Jason not just as the man who had tried to destroy him, but as a symbol of a broken system that needed to change. Every time he helped someone break free from the cycle of crime and hopelessness, he felt he was honoring the potential Jason might have had if someone had reached him sooner. Returning to Willow Creek years later, Adam returned to Willow Creek, not to stay, but to visit. The town had moved on, though his story remained part of its folklore. He walked through the familiar streets, nodding at familiar faces who greeted him warmly. At the schoolyard, he paused to watch children playing, their laughter a poignant reminder of the life he had left behind. One of his former students spotted him and waved. "Mr. Carter," the boy shouted, running up to him. Others soon joined, their laughter filling the air. For a moment, Adam felt like the teacher he once was. "We've missed you," said a girl. Adam smiled, ruffling her hair. "I've missed you too. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start." Adam smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "How's year 6 treating you?" "Good," the boy said, "but we miss you." Adam's chest tightened, but he kept his smile steady. "I miss you too." As he walked away, he felt lighter, the burden of his past finally giving way to hope. He didn't hate Willow Creek anymore. It would always be a part of him, just as Jason would. But his new life, built on compassion and a desire to help others, had given him something far more valuable than the quiet routine he once cherished: a sense of purpose. As he walked back to his car, Adam felt lighter. The turmoil that had once consumed him was now a quiet echo, a reminder of the path he had traveled and the lives he had touched along the way. End of the story. Thank you for listening. If you would like to hear more of these stories free of charge, please click the subscribe button.